Hello and welcome to Study with Sudhir. My name is Sudhir and today I'm going to get you a set of name the following questions as many of you students have been asking for practice in name the following. The countdown has begun for biology, so let's start right away. Okay, ICSE Class 10. This is what we have for you in name the following. Let's start with this. The suppressed allele of a gene. This is in fact come in ICSE specimen paper 2023. What is the suppressed allele of a gene called? Yes? Any of you? You are right. It is called as a recessive allele. Recessive, mind the spelling because in name the following, you will have to be writing the spellings and therefore mind that this has recessive single C and double S, recessive allele it's called. And the one that gets expressed in the allele, that's called a dominant allele. This is the one that is suppressed and it is called a recessive allele. The next one, the knot-like mass of blood capillaries in a Bowman's capsule. This in fact was there in the specimen paper of 2023. The knot-like mass of blood capillaries in a Bowman's capsule. What would that be? That would be called the glomerulus. Mind the spelling because in name the following, you will always have to write the spelling, and if you mess up on the spelling, you are going to lose marks. So this is called the glomerulus. Okay. Let's quit this and go up. Okay. The mineral element required for the synthesis of thyroxine. This again was there in the ICSE specimen paper for 2023. The mineral element required for the synthesis of thyroxine. Many of you would know that we speak about, yes, iodized salt. The reason we speak about iodized salt is because iodine has a very important role to play in the production of thyroxine, and therefore the mineral element required for synthesis of thyroxine is called iodide. The next one. One gaseous compound that depletes the oxygen layer. What is the gaseous compound that depletes the oxygen layer? Let me tell you that there are actually multiple compounds that deplete the oxygen layer, but the most popular one among them is called the CFC. This is something that you find in all the refrigerants, in the coolants, in sprays, all those places you find. You can stick to the CFC, which is the chlorofluorocarbon. Again, mind the spelling. You can't just leave it at CFC. You would be expected to write the spelling chlorofluorocarbon. This is what we say causes holes in the ozone layer, and that can be very dangerous. Why? Because we get ultraviolet rays, and those rays which are harmful and can cause skin cancers. That's why we don't want holes in the ozone layer. And those holes in the ozone layer, or it depletes the ozone layer, that chemical is called as a chlorofluorocarbon. One of them is called the chlorofluorocarbon. The statistical study of human population. What is the statistical study of human population called? It's called demography. D-E-M-O-G-R-A, demography. Okay? Demography. Okay, let's now quit this so we can go to our next question. Okay. Again, interesting. Okay. The kind of twins that are formed from two fertilized eggs. As you know, usually a sperm is expected to fertilize one egg and then a single zygote is formed. What is the zygote? Zygote is when the fusion of the sperm and the egg happens. It's called a zygote. But sometimes, as you know, every monthly cycle, there's only a single egg that's supposed to be released. But sometimes the ovary releases two eggs, and in that case, you have two fertilized eggs. So the kind of twins formed from two fertilized eggs is called what? This is, there are many variations of this question that can come in, and I will tell you what this is going to be. So when you have two eggs, it's going to be called dizygotic. The kind of twins are called dizygotic twins. They are also called fraternal twins. Why? Because they are like any other brother and sister. They are like children born to the same mother and father, the way, however similar or dissimilar they may be, that's what they are called. But sometimes what happens is the kind of twins formed from two fertilized eggs is dizygotic or fraternal. But if there are twins born from the same fertilized egg, what happens is that once the zygote is formed, it sometimes splits into two. At that time, you have two individuals who are very similar to each other, and they are called as identical twins. So in this case, when you call them fraternal twins or dizygotic twins, in the case where the single ova or the ovum is fertilized by a sperm and then it splits into two and twins are born, it's called as identical twins, or they are also called as monozygotic twins. Di is two, di as you can see is two, and it will be monozygotic twins. There is also another category when the zygote doesn't completely divide. What happens? You get something called conjoined twins. You see pictures, you must have seen pictures sometimes of babies that are joined either at the hip or at the head, any of those places. Those are called Siamese twins, or they are called as conjoined twins. This is monozygotic and that is called Siamese twins. So let's also go to the next one. A method of contraception in which the sperm duct is cut and ligated. Sperm duct is part of the male reproductive system. And what is that kind of contraception? What is contraception? Contraception is a method of family planning in which the sperm duct is cut and ligated. It is called, yes, one is called, the female one is something else and the male one is something else. This is called vasectomy. V-A-S-E-C-T-O-M-Y, vasectomy. Okay. In the same thing, if the question had been turned to say a method of contraception in which the fallopian tube, which is part of the female reproductive system, that is cut and ligated, that is called tubectomy. It's called tubectomy. Tubectomy is not the answer in this case. Let me just clarify to you, but that is called tubectomy if the question here had been about fallopian tube being cut and ligated. In this case, it is vasectomy when the sperm duct is cut and ligated. Let me also tell you that in this world, because of the kind of gender equations we have, more number of tubectomies, especially in India, happen than vasectomies because it's the woman who undergoes the family planning operation. But vasectomy is in fact a simpler procedure than tubectomy and should be preferred because it's a simpler procedure and it doesn't affect otherwise the physical strength or otherwise of the man. So vasectomy is the cutting or the ligation of the sperm duct in the male. Okay. The permanent stoppage of menstruation after a particular age in females. Usually between the age of 10 and 15 is when the first menstrual cycle starts in girls or in females, and that has a particular name. We'll come to that later. And the permanent stoppage of menstruation after a particular age is about 45 to 55 is when the monthly cycles, the menstruation stops, and that is called, let me go back to this and get you the annotation and we'll get this, and this is called menopause. MENOPAUSE. So a lot of hormonal changes take place in women at that age, 45 to 55, when menopause happens. And the first cycle that a young girl, 10 to 15 years of age, gets, even that can be a question for you, and that is called menarche. Menarche it's called, okay? But that's not the answer for this question. Here, the permanent stoppage of menstruation after a particular age in females is called menopause. The beginning of the menstrual cycle in a female between 10 to 15 years of age is called menarche. It's spelled like MENARCHE, but it's pronounced as menarche. The next one, fixing of the developing zygote on the uterine wall. We spoke about the zygote coming, whether there are twins or there is a single zygote. When that zygote goes and implants itself on the wall of the uterus, it's called what? It's called exactly what it sounds like, implantation. It implants itself in the wall of the uterus. Implantation, it's called. Okay, that's where the zygote will develop into a baby. Implantation, it's called. It will develop into a baby. It stays there for 9 months. 9 months is the usual period of pregnancy in females and humans. And implantation, so that's how it implants itself on the wall of the uterus. There's a placenta that will develop, and then the baby comes out full term after 9 months. Okay, the next one. The accessory gland in human males whose secretion activates the sperm. The reason we have taken this chapter is because this chapter had been avoided in the earlier years, couple of years, and now this chapter is back, and therefore there's a good chance that more number of questions can be from this particular chapter. So the accessory gland in human males whose secretion activates the sperms. It's a very small gland, and the answer to this question is, come up with your answers. Can we hear it? Yes, that's right. It's called seminal vesicles. Seminal vesicles. So what the seminal vesicle does is releases very small amounts of substances. Seminal vesicles. Yeah. Mind the spelling. Wherever I'm writing it out, it's because it's complicated. I don't want you to make spelling mistakes. So it's called seminal vesicles. So that provides the kind of energy for the sperm. The sperm has to travel a long distance. So it needs to swim, and it has to have a lot of energy. And that energy is provided by the secretions from the seminal vesicles, which activate the sperm. The endocrine cells present in pancreas. As all of you know, there are lots of endocrine glands that we have. And the pancreas plays a very important part. And this question, I can tell you, is complicated and very often comes, and therefore I would urge you to listen carefully. This is called the endocrine cells present in pancreas. They are called the islets of Langerhans. What does islets mean? Islets means they are islet cells. They are small cells. They are actually like islands in the pancreas, the organ, the pancreas, and they are called islets of Langerhans, and they have a very important function. Can you tell me what that function is? Islets of Langerhans. What they do is, there are two types in this, alpha and beta. Even that I think is there in your portion. They produce very important hormones called insulin and glucagon. Insulin and glucagon. And they are the ones that regulate the metabolism of sugar in the body. As you know, every carbohydrate, everything is broken down ultimately into a glucose, and that metabolism is maintained by the islets of Langerhans, which are cells that are produced, that are present in the pancreas, and they produce these hormones which are called insulin or glucagon. This was the islets of Langerhans is the answer for it. They are called islet cells, but I would urge you to write the answer as islets of Langerhans. Okay, next one. Okay. The gland that regulates calcium in the blood. What is the gland that regulates calcium in the blood? Calcium, as you know, is very important also for blood clotting. That's right. Calcium is important for blood clotting. Just remember this. Calcium important for blood clotting. Iron is important for the hemoglobin, carriage of oxygen in the body. And the gland that regulates calcium in the blood is called let me get back to this and show you what it is called, so that we can go at one go for all these questions. Okay, annotation, and then we get this. The gland that regulates calcium in the blood is called a parathyroid gland. This is important. Please remember, parathyroid. Parathyroid gland. Okay. The gland that regulates calcium in the body is called a parathyroid gland. Next one. The form in which glucose is stored in liver. This is again very important, because very often children make that mistake of the words. I'm not telling you the answer yet. I hope some of you have got the answer, or most of you, if not all of you, have got the answer. The form in which glucose is stored in liver is called glycogen. Because so many of these terms are thrown at you, it can be confusing, and therefore I'm repeating. The glucose turns into glycogen. The hormone that we spoke about that is produced by the pancreas in the islet of Langerhans is called glucagon. Glucagon, insulin, glucagon are the hormones, and glycogen is the form in which the glucose is stored in liver. So mind you, this is glycogen, okay? And the hormone which is produced in the pancreas is called glucagon. We already went through that. A condition that causes a condition caused due to the hyposecretion of thyroxine in children. Let me tell you, hyposecretion. Hypo means what? Hypo means very little. When it is very little, it's called hypo. Hyper means more and hypo means less. Okay. Thyroxine is a hormone. In adults, what it does is that it helps in the metabolism in the body. And in children, there are different conditions that can be there. Largely, what I would say is, even in this question, a little tricky it sounds, but a condition caused due to hyposecretion of thyroxine. If it happens while the baby is still in the womb, it's an infant we are talking about, then it is a condition that's called cretinism, because the baby will be born cretinism, it's called, okay? When the children slightly grow up, even then there is a kind of a dwarfing, okay? In children also there is a dwarfing because the thyroxine is not available in plenty, or it's available in, it's very deficient in the body, then some kind of dwarfing and stunting happens. And therefore, if you have multiple choice questions in which if they don't put it as cretinism, but they put it as pituitary dwarfism, pituitary, I think I spelled it wrong, I'm not going to correct that, pituitary dwarfism, it can be called, okay? Any stunting can be associated with this particular thyroxine being present in small numbers. The hormone that controls the basal metabolic rate, I just in fact gave you the answers. The hormone that controls the basal metabolic rate is called the thyroid hormones. The thyroid hormone you can write, okay? The thyroid hormone, the hormone that controls the basal metabolic rate. What is the basal metabolic rate? Basal metabolic rate means the rate at which the food that you eat is processed by the body or burnt by the body is called basal metabolic rate. And if your basal metabolic rate is very low, then what happens? You can start putting on weight. So the play of these hormones can lead to people say, isn't it, that I have a thyroid problem, so I'm putting on weight. So that is because of the basal metabolic rate going down. Okay. Now, the next one, a genetic disorder in which blood does not clot. Yes? Yes. Genetic disorder in which blood does not clot. So, it's called hemophilia. Let me just put that down for you so that the spelling here again is important. Hemo, as you know, can be spelled with an H-A-E or H-E. So, it can be a hemophilia. You can keep it like this, hemophilia. So in this case, what happens is if there is an injury, either an internal injury or an external injury, then the blood cannot clot and they lose a lot of blood, and that can be very endangering even to life. And that's the reason why we say it's important that the blood clots. And blood clotting is, of course, quite a complicated process which we have learnt about. And probably the next question, yes, the enzyme essential for blood clotting. Do you know the enzyme that's essential for blood clotting? It's a process that happens. And what happens? In this case, the answer that you must give is simply the enzyme that essential for blood clotting is thrombin. Thrombin. What happens is that in the presence of calcium, there is something called prothrombin that turns into thrombin, and then that thrombin, again in the presence of calcium, will convert fibrinogen into fibrin. That causes the kind of a network of some kind of a mesh in order to able to stop the blood flow, the blood cells, all of them go and clog that. It forms a net like this and it clogs that, and that's how actually clotting happens. So you require a thrombin in order to be able to, for your blood to clot. That also in the presence of calcium it happens. Okay. Now the next ones. Okay. The term used for Bowman's capsule and glomerulus together. You know that the Bowman's capsule and glomerulus are present in the kidney and they carry out the function of ultrafiltration. The blood comes in and then it gets filtrated. But what is that bit which is Bowman's capsule plus the glomerulus together called? Yes, it's a very interesting name. So certainly remember it because it is at least interesting. It's called, let me go back to my pen so that I can show you. Write it and show because this is again something in which the spelling can be a little complicated. So it's called Malpighian tubules. Malpighian tubules is a full thing. So in this case, what you're going to write, Malpighian corpuscles you will write, okay? Or renal corpuscles also they are called, but I would suggest that you stick with this word, Malpighian corpuscles. You know, this is the part which actually, this is the part which, you know, when you have a section of the kidney, the parts that is dotted in the cortex, that's the Malpighian corpuscles. It's a combined name for the Bowman's capsule plus the glomerulus together. The next one, the thin membranous sac serving as the reservoir of the urine. That's again a simple one. What is it? It's called the urinary bladder. It's a bladder. It's a sac in which what happens from the renal pelvis after the filtration happens and it goes through the through the glomerulus and through the Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, Henle's loop, then the distal convoluted tubule, reabsorption of the ions happens, reabsorption of whatever water happens, reabsorption of sodium happens, there's the regulation of potassium as well. All that is then pushed into the pelvis of the kidney. From the pelvis through the ureter, the urine comes to the urinary bladder. So the answer in this case is the thin membranous sac serving as the reservoir of the urine is called the urinary bladder. Bladder is spelled with a double D, bladder. Okay. Okay, we go to the next one now. The muscles which protects the urethra. Protects, should I say, or should I say it regulates the flow of the urine. What is those muscles? They are called sphincter muscles. I again forgot. So I need to go back and touch this, get the pen out, and therefore write it here. Sphincter muscles. These are important muscles that help to regulate the flow of the urine. What people say is that if those muscles lose control, the sphincter muscles lose control, then sometimes there is leakage of urine that happens when people become older. So these are muscular problems and therefore need to be exercised. There are muscles to be, there are exercises that are specifically told to people if there is a problem in the control of the urine itself. Otherwise, it's a voluntary activity, isn't it? When you want to release urine or you want to hold the urine, if you are not able to find a washroom in time. The organ responsible for protecting the eye from sweat. In this case, I wouldn't call it an organ. It's actually a structure. The structure. The question should have been, the structure responsible for protecting the eye from sweat is called, as simple as that. And here I'm giving you a hint of the answer. The eyebrow. Yes. The eyebrow. So God has designed us in such a manner that many of these things are taken care of, the protection, so that the eyes don't get the sweat. So you have the eyebrow, which is a structure. It's not really an organ, but it is a structure that helps to protect the eye from sweating. Otherwise, we sweat a lot in the forehead, isn't it? When it is very sunny, very humid, we tend to do that. And the God has also designed other ways in which he can protect the eye. The eye otherwise is like a glassy globe, should I say. And that globe needs to be protected because it's very, very delicate and we need to protect it. So a bony socket in which the eye is well protected. What is that bony socket in which the eye is well protected? All of you know about the skull, in which there are those kind of, have you seen the skull? Just the skeleton, I mean. You will be able to find crevices, or should I say those locations inside which the eye is kept. And that bony socket is called, there are two of them, isn't it? They're called orbits. Orbits. Okay. Then the internal layer of the eye, which prevents reflection of light. As you know, any light surface will in fact reflect, will reflect light, and you need in the eye a layer which is not reflecting the light, and that's called choroid. Remember this is a technical term, but you must remember this word called choroid. It has a lot of blood vessels, and therefore it is very, very dark. It's thick and it is very dark, and that helps to stop the reflection of light in the eyes. Okay. Now, the part of the brain that carries the impulses from one hemisphere of the cerebellum to the other. I'm going to trick you into getting multiple questions in this so that you get a practice as well. So the part of the brain that carries impulses from one hemisphere of the cerebellum to the other is called, it's a very simple one. It's called, okay, I need to go back to my pen. Okay. Think about it. So cerebellum we are talking about. Cerebellum is what? Cerebellum is that part of the brain which is responsible for muscular coordination, for balance. In the last video, I told you about how people who have a drink too many are walking without much balance. So that is the part which is cerebellum. So one part of the cerebellum to the other is pons. And if I were to change this question and ask you, the part of the brain that carries impulses from one hemisphere of the cerebrum to the other, what would your answer be? Yes, many of you got it. It's called corpus callosum. That part of the brain which is connecting one part of the one hemisphere of the cerebrum with the other is called corpus callosum. Okay. But in this case, we are talking about cerebellum and one hemisphere of the cerebellum to the other. It's called pons. Okay. Then the next one, the kind of lens needed to correct myopia. What is myopia? Myopia is what many of you youngsters would have possibly if your eyes have not been have been abused by you, etc. So you're able to see things that are far off clearly, but you're able to see things that are close by clearly and not able to see things that are far off that clearly. So that's called myopia, or this is called also as short-sightedness, and it is corrected using a concave lens. So hypermetropia, which is long sight, is corrected using a convex lens, whereas myopia is corrected using concave lens. Some of you may be wearing specs, right? So the kind of lens that is there is a concave lens in order to correct your myopia, or it's also called as short-sightedness. The main site responsible for photosynthesis. What will you write here? All of you know that it's green plants that have photosynthesis. So should we write a plant? Should we write a leaf? But sometimes even the stems have the green part, which can carry out, of many plants in which the stem is in fact green and also carries out photosynthesis. So what will you write here? The main site responsible for photosynthesis. Should we write leaf? Should we write green stem? What? So what you should write is a chloroplast. Let me come back again for this. So it would be a chloroplast. What's a chloroplast? Chloroplast is that kind of a cell that has something in it that helps you do the photosynthesis. It has chlorophyll in it, chloroplast. So you will write the main site responsible for photosynthesis is chloroplast. The substance which captures photons in plants, that, yes, is chlorophyll. And you can write, in fact, chlorophyll molecules. Chlorophyll. Mind the spelling again. Chlorophyll molecule. Okay. We now go to the next part of it. Okay. We are already getting towards the end of this paper. 28th question now to go. Only 7 more. We're going to have 35 in this set. The chemical used to test starch. We spoke about this mineral earlier, but in this case, we are talking about the chemical. It's called what? The chemical used to test starch. All of you must have done this in your labs. If you haven't, you can try it. It's called iodine. So how do you test starch with iodine? So they have these iodides, potassium iodide, iodine solution they call it, and then you put it in starch. Iodine solution otherwise is yellowish brown, should I say. And if you put that solution in starch, starch is very often white in color, you get a very deep blue color, and that means that there is starch present. So there's a test used for both starch, or you can use it for iodine also by adding starch. So it will turn into a blue color. So iodine is the answer there. The immediate end product of photosynthesis. We spoke about this particular compound, but we spoke in the animal context, in the human context. The immediate end product of photosynthesis is, yes, it is glucose. Sorry, that would be wrong. Let's come. Okay. Glucose. Photosynthesis, all of you must be knowing the equation that we say for photosynthesis. So glucose is that C6H12O6, isn't it? Glucose, C6H12O6. You don't need that here, but this is the sugar, the simple sugar, the glucose that the plants produce after photosynthesis. The energy currency of the cell. Let's complete that also here. The energy currency of the cell, this very often comes, and this is called an ATP. What is ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. There is also something called ADP. That's also a precursor of the ATP, and it's broken down into ADP as well, plus energy, adenosine triphosphate. So phosphate. Okay. Adenosine triphosphate. Okay. The energy currency of the cell, meaning this is what it uses for carrying out any activity in the cell. The ATP is required for any activity because any activity would require energy, and therefore it's the ATP that is the form in which the cell is able to use its energy. The glucose will have to be converted into energy for it to be able to use it. Now, the structure that has the organ of Corti. You know what the organ of Corti is? The organ of Corti is something that is present where? Yes, you are right. Organ of Corti is present in the structure that has the organ of Corti. The answer that you must write is cochlea. Cochlea, as you know, is a kind of a shell-like structure which is present in the inner ear and responsible for our auditory senses, audition, meaning hearing. So this is called cochlea. The apparatus used to record the rate of transpiration in plants. Potometer, Gannon's potometer is what we say. So I'm writing here potometer. You may have to mention that it is Gannon's potometer that you're talking about. One of the students was pointing out yesterday that the teacher has said that we must mention the kind of potometer that is used. So Gannon's potometer. Then the next one, let's go to the last three now. Small openings present in the bark of woody stems. What are those small openings present in the bark of woody stems called? Are they called stomata? No, they are called lenticels. I need to come back to the pen again and we get the annotation and then here. Okay, they are called lenticels, and the spelling once again important. Lenticels are present on the bark, obviously that's the dry stem, and bark of woody stems, which is the dry stems, and they are called lenticels, and they are permanently open. As you know, stomata are present on the surface of the leaves, the undersurface of the leaves. They are even present sometimes on the green stems themselves, but those have they can open and they can close depending on whether they want to release the water or store the water, and so on and so forth. Okay, so lenticels is the answer to this one, that if it is on a woody stem, it's called a lenticel. Okay, now the last two. the kidney-shaped cells present on the stomata. What are the kidney-shaped cells present on the stomata? Sometimes they can ask you just from the leaf itself, what are the kidney-shaped cells provided on the stomata, present on the stomata? They are called guard cells, as you know. Okay? Very often people get confused when they write kidney-shaped cells and they immediately write stomata. The stomata per se are not kidney-shaped. It's the guard cells that are kidney-shaped. Stomata, should I say, is almost dumbbell-shaped. As you know, this is the guard cell, isn't it? Like this. Guard cells. And this is the opening of the stomata. So this is kidney-shaped. And this stomata, you can consider it almost a dumbbell kind of a shape. So it comes together when you want to say, not allow the water to pass. Depending on the turgidity of the cell, it will come together and the pores will close, and otherwise it will open when they want transpiration to happen and there is a lot of water that needs to be let out. Then that happens. The waxy layer, the air regulation also of course happens through that, the absorption of gases. The waxy layer on the epidermis of the leaf meant to reduce transpiration. That's again something that you must remember and spell right as well. It's called the cuticle. Okay, so now we come to the end of this set of questions, and let me wish you best of luck. The countdown has begun. Best of luck. Stay cool. Remember whatever you have learned. Revise last minute certainly, and ace your exam. Thank you so much for watching.